want to thank Jeanette for the opportunity to share some of my story with you. My name is Steve Berry, and I am seeking to fill one of the chairs in the Vermont State House, the one vacated by Jeff Wilson. In Bennington District 4, people have 2 votes, and I hope that one of those votes will be made for me. To begin my story, my father and my mom were both from Boston, Massachusetts. My dad, at the age of 19, was called or went to war in fighting in Europe. He was a flyer in the Army Air Corps. He flew B-17 Flying Fortresses. And after the war, came back home, married my mom, and then had me. In the meantime, my dad went to Boston University on the GI Bill and was going to go into business. And then in 1951, he got a call from the government again, and off he went to Korea. This time he flew over 100 missions. And on one of those missions, he was shot and was able to make it through that. He had another experience where he felt like he had to change his life and his direction. So when he came back, he announced to my mother that he was not going to go into business, but that he had received a call and wanted to go into the ministry. And so that's what he did. My dad abandoned his business career and went into the ministry. And so I grew up as a preacher's kid. And that was a different life than my mom had expected or anticipated. But it was a life that I got to know very well. In 1955, my dad purchased property in northern Vermont on the cusp of the kingdom up in Eden. And they didn't have a road all the way in. We had to walk in, and when my little sister was born, had to bring the cribs and the carriages and everything through the woods on a little path to get to the cabins. We still own those cabins, and that's where I grew up over the summers until I moved there full time. It was in Eden, Vermont that I came to value my Vermont heritage, and I still have the call to be in Eden and in Vermont. I think it's the best and most unique and beautiful place in the world. My parents taught me the values that I needed for life. I learned as a boy the 10 Commandments and the Beatitudes, the books of the Bible, the parables of Jesus, and learned about all of that. But it only took me some time to go away to really appreciate that. I went to Europe, dropped out of college. I went to Hope College for a few years, dropped out, and then went to Europe, to Switzerland mostly. And I worked there, and I was able to experience an upstairs, downstairs type of life in St. Moritz, where we have relatives. And during that time, I saw people who were really rich, and I saw people who were really poor, and I was a worker with mostly Italians at the time, and had an appreciation for work as I grew up that way. And I worked in Europe for years and then traveled and back and forth and saw a lot of poverty during that period of time. Poverty that I had not experienced before while living in the United States. And it prompted me to evaluate my own values, and I decided that I wanted to do something that would serve people. And so I met a wonderful young lady in Zurich, and she returned to the United States with me, and we've been married for 40 years. My wife, Carol, and we have 3 children. But we started out in Eden, Vermont. I went back to my Vermont roots because my father never owned his own home because he was a pastor. We lived in parsonages. He had this property, and that was our home, basically. That was a place that we owned, the place that we came to. In the summer of 1974, Carol and I were there thinking about what we would do in next steps, and I was on my way to Johnson, Vermont, and on Route 100 I passed a young man sitting by the side of the road who had his head in his hands. And it was really odd because it was about a mile from any homes. So I drove down the road for about a mile and turned the car around, parked on the side of the road, walked across the road, Route 100, up the banking where he was sitting, and sat down next to him, and he was sobbing. And I said, "What's the problem?" And he said, "My friend just went and shot himself, and he's dead." And I didn't know what to say, but because it was an awkward moment, I decided that I had to say something. So I said, "Well, I know what you're going through." And he looked at me and said, "How the hell can you say that?" And he was right. He got up. I thought he was going to smack me, and I deserved it. But he didn't hit me. He just started running off in the direction of the field that he was in. And I followed, and he was swearing at me as I followed him. And then I took him by the shoulder. I spun him around, and I said, "Hey, look, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm following you. I have no idea what this is all about. But I think that if I leave, we're going to miss an opportunity. And I don't know what that means." And I didn't. I had no idea. He kept on walking, and I followed him. We walked down to a farmhouse, a little house, where there were half a dozen teenagers who were all sobbing. I introduced myself, found out when the funeral was, invited them to come to the cabin and talk with me and my wife. And they did, and I went to the funeral experience with them, and that was quite profound. Then something happened. 2 weeks later, I walked into the post office, and Postmaster Stu was there, and he said, "Steve, I understand you had 1 year of seminary over the last years, and we're looking for a minister. Would you consider us?" And so I became a minister at the age of 24 in Eden, Vermont, and North High Park, Vermont, and that started my odyssey, my whole life of seeking to be present to people and to serve them. And the young man that I told you about, he became my leader in the youth group. And all of those youth became involved in the youth group, and they invited more youth. And pretty soon we had an extraordinary experience with all of them. I served there for years, and that prompted me to go ahead and to become involved in all sorts of the lives of people in Vermont. I know Vermont, I know Vermonters. I have had years of service, and now the whole idea is how we get involved with partnerships and how those partnerships, because I never did anything by myself, I always did it in partnership and relationships with people in churches and communities, and regardless of where they came from or what their beliefs were, we always sought to do something that would be beneficial to the community, and that's what I've sought to do. So whether it's been developing soup kitchens or having interfaith programs or working with Millard Fuller and Habitat for Humanity, serving everywhere around. And now we have an opportunity to take these gifts and skills into another realm, and that is the State House. And that's what I'm going to seek to do, seek to be able to utilize my skills and talents and time for the benefit of Vermonters, as I've done in the past. I know how to get things done. I'm a man of action. And I also know what we need. We need to protect our environment. We need to have a healthy environment here in Vermont so that children can enjoy what I enjoyed as I grew up. Grandchildren can have what I had. We have to look 20 to 50 years out, not just do the expedient thing, but look at health care for everyone. Everyone is entitled to have a doctor, and it's that simple. We all should have good health care. We all should have a healthy environment, and we all should have a very good, workable local government. We learned that in the meeting house tradition that I grew up in, and I believe that that's still what we need to do. We need to work together in the local governments to really do what we need to do here in the state of Vermont. I believe in the challenges of the democratic participatory process, and think that those who have rights had better maintain them. And that's what we are called to do right now. So I urge you to vote for me on November 4th. I will serve you well, as I've served Vermonters since I was a young man, and I will get things done for you as I have done in the past, and I look forward to working together as I have done in the last 6 months as I helped with the label GMO laws coming into Vermont, and also with JRS 27 to get corporate money out of politics, special interest group money, that is, out of politics, in reversing Citizens United. We have to protect ourselves from what's going on right now across the country. And we have to already start thinking of those people who want to come into Vermont and take our resources. We have to protect ourselves, and I'll be a good one to support you and the citizens of Vermont in making sure that that happens. Thanks so much for your help. Vote Steve Barry on November 4th. Thank you.